type even though I'm still waking up. And that part was probably in the video. Good morning. We are on chapter 17 of Breadcrumbs by Ursu. I feel like I need a little bit of a refresher since I was off enjoying my weekend, since I'm sure you guys were enjoying your weekend too. Where we last left off, Hazel had just met a woman with a swan skin, and she was old and she was scary looking, and she was trying to tear Hazel's face off until she was rescued by a boy who she's called the Bird Keeper. He and his sister escaped into the woods a long time ago, actually in New Jersey, when we know Hazel's from Minneapolis, and those woods shouldn't be connected at all. He and his sister escaped, and his sister was turned into a bird. So now all he does is he stays home and he protects her. And he's trying to protect Hazel as well. He's told her to get out of the woods as far as she can possibly get, but Hazel knows she has to rescue Jack from the Snow Queen first, or the White Witch, as best as she can. So he's promised that if she blows on her wilderness whistle, he will hear it and he will come help her. Wherever she is in the woods, he'll be able to find her. Hopefully, she doesn't have to use that newfound skill. However, I know from reading more stories that usually if somebody brings up something like that in a book, they're foreshadowing. And foreshadowing means that it's going to come up and be important later. So, I'm going to start reading chapter 17, and I'm going to keep an eye out for anything that's been foreshadowed or anything that might foreshadow something in the future. Is that Jakai? Three Horsemen? I'll keep my eye on the chat. Chapter 17, The Marketplace. Hazel walked through the trees toward the path, hearing the bird song in her head. Hi, baby. She wondered if the bird remembered anything of her life before, if she wanted to tell her brother things, or if she dreamed of having 2 legs and running. Or did she just think about birdseed and wonder at that funny boy who read her books? Ben was just a few years older than Hazel, and he was stuck here. He and his sister were all long gray string now. A few days ago, she would have found this story so beautiful. It was the sort of story that your mother told you before she tucked you in at night, and you would sigh and think of the steadfast bird keeper and his bird sister and the marvelous tragedy of it all. It would have been beautiful as a story. Hazel would have gone to sleep confident that if she were a bird, Jack would be her keeper, and that they would spend their days in a small cabin tucked in the fairy tale woods, and no one would ever tell them they needed to face reality. There was a time when this was true, but maybe not anymore. And maybe she wouldn't want him to anyway. Jack would have a big puff of wool left, and she could learn to be a bird. Hazel didn't know what the right thing was. What are you supposed to do when something like that happens? Do you hold on or let go? It didn't matter, though. Hazel was here in this place where people didn't mean her well, and she was on her own. No one even knew where she was. And if someone decided to turn her into a bird, there would be no one to look after her. She'd have to figure it out by herself. The chat is never active, babe. I assume some people are watching on their phones and it's hard to type. That part wasn't in the book. That was just for you. And for you. She'd have to figure it out by herself. Hazel stepped back on the path but kept to the side, and she walked on. She found herself reacting to every murmur of the wind, each and every one a potential footfall of someone coming toward her. There were witches in the woods. They stole beauty from swans and then rotted from the inside. There were couples who wanted to turn girls into pretty little birds. The woods does strange things to people. Hazel was exhausted. Her wounds throbbed. Her muscles felt like warm Play-Doh. She wanted nothing more than to curl up on a pile of leaves and rest just for a few hours. And the cold was there too. It called her forward, whispering promises to her that it would not keep. Hazel's skin prickled from underneath her shirt. She stopped and got out her jacket from her backpack. She saw the whistle at the bottom of the bag and tucked it into her jacket pocket where she could get it quickly if she needed it. At least she wasn't alone anymore, in some way. Ahead of her, somewhere, was the White Witch, who had a palace of ice with a heart to match. The Fates were afraid of her. Ben tried to warn her away. Hazel was supposed to defeat her somehow, though she could not even function in the real world. What was she against a witch? She couldn't even deal with 5th-grade boys. All Hazel could try to do was not to think about what lay ahead, to numb herself a little bit. She ate another energy bar, and she no longer cared what it tasted like. She had 2 left. She should have asked Ben for some food. She should have rested there for the night. She should have thought. The sky was darkening. It was going to be night soon, and Hazel realized that a wood night is nothing like a city night, that the darkness would have nothing to temper it, that unchecked by any light source anywhere, it would swirl around her and squeeze her. And she had no flashlight. She had given it up because it was a shiny thing, and she was hoping there were answers in a piece of string. It had been evening when she crossed into the woods from the park. It would have been impenetrably dark within hours. What had she been thinking? She put her hand on the whistle in her pocket. Ben would come. She could go back to his cabin and rest for the night. That would be the smart thing to do. But she didn't want to go backward. She was supposed to get Jack, that was all. She could just walk a little more. And so she did. She walked onward for another hour into the cold and dusk. Tick-tock, tick-tock. And then she felt a presence. Something in the shadows, something all too familiar. She was not alone. She crept onward, her muscles tense, looking carefully around for her company. And there, in the dark shadows a few yards off the path, 2 wolves. They were small and lean, and they paced back and forth in the trees, watching her carefully. Hazel gulped and kept moving forward, conscious of the eyes that stayed on her. Her hand went to the whistle in her pocket. Ben. She could use it. She could call him and he would come. But would he be fast enough? Then she saw a glow touching the sky up ahead, and Hazel relaxed her hand and quickened her steps. She rounded a bend in the path and saw her salvation. There was a valley just below, and in it a little village. It straddled a small, swift-moving river spanned by a little stone bridge. The houses were small, made of white stucco, and dark wooden beams and thick thatched roofs. She could see people in cloaks riding horses and milling around the stone streets. And then, on the other side of the path, 2 more wolves appeared. One sat down on its haunches just a few feet from her. The other walked parallel to her, a feral shadow. Hazel looked at the ground and hurried her steps, trying to pretend she was not about to burst apart with fear. Her hand flew to the whistle again, as if that itself could protect her. When she looked up, she saw that 1 more wolf had joined the group to her right, and that up ahead of her was a great wooden fence. There was a gate in the fence, and Hazel rushed to it and knocked. A moment passed while her heart threatened to explode, and then the gate opened a crack. A tall, dark woman in a cloak peered through the crack, and when she saw Hazel, her face changed. "Come in," she said. "Hurry." The woman motioned her in. Hazel stepped forward, shooting a glance behind her as she went. 9 wolves were on the path behind her, all pacing restlessly, all watching her as she crossed through the gate. Hazel stared at them as the gate closed behind her. "What are you doing out there at night?" the guard asked. "I was looking for a place to rest," she said. "Well, you found it. Good thing, too. The wolves are gathering. Don't worry, the fence keeps them out of here." Hazel exhaled. "Good," she said. Her eyes traveled up to the guard, who was looking at her face with a curious expression. Hazel's hand flew to her gashed cheek. The wound was thick and long and warm. She could only imagine how she must look. "That looks pretty nasty," the guard said. "Something got you?" Hazel nodded. "Well, the market's on," she said. "As always, you can find whatever you're looking for there." "Oh, I'm not. I lost my friend. I'm looking for him." Her brow darkened. "What does she look like? Is she blonde?" Hazel corrected. "He has brown hair." "He? Oh." Something passed over the woman's face. "The princess is saving the night, eh?" Hazel shifted. "I guess." "I hope the night doesn't mind." She let out a laugh that sounded like it could cut something. Said Hazel. "Do you know the White Witch?" She might as well ask. The guard stiffened and then looked around. "You're new here, huh?" she asked, her voice lowered. "Yes," Hazel said. Something began to gnaw on her heart. "And you're looking for her?" "Yes." "I see." The guard glanced at the ground. Most people don't admit that. They just go. Hazel's heart sped up. "What do you know about her? How do I defeat her?" "Defeat her? That's what you want?" Hazel did her best to look very brave. "Yes, she has my friend." "I see. Look, kid, you can't defeat her. She's never going to go away." "What do you mean?" "I mean she's always waiting there at the end of this place. All you can do is pretend she's not there. That's what most people here do." Hazel looked up at the guard, whose face was rueful and whose body seemed cloaked by more than wool. She was too tired to make sense of this senselessness, so she thanked her and walked past her into the village. Hazel walked down the hill to the marketplace. She didn't know what she was looking for exactly. Some available shelter she could crawl into, some hobbit inn that took energy bars as payment. It didn't matter as long as there was a place to sleep. But when she arrived at the market, she forgot her fatigue and simply stared at the scene before her. The marketplace was a cobblestone square about half a block wide, surrounded by little shops, all cast aglow with torches. Even at night, the square was thrumming with people. Hazel felt something unknot in her as she moved toward all of them. Jellyfish. Jellyfish. Jelly. Leave it. Thank you. Just say puppy. Settle. Hazel felt something unknot in her as she moved toward all of them. There was solace in company, at least right now. Hazel was tired of being alone. She would have expected to stand out in the crowd here, with her backpack and jeans and shiny green jacket, not to mention her dark skin and hair. And there were plenty of people who looked like they dressed up for the Renaissance Festival with wool cloaks and tall leather boots. But she saw a man in all black leather, and another in a trench coat with fedora, a woman in jeans and a bright red peacoat. And they weren't all white and European looking either. She saw African faces, Asian, Hispanic. It seemed like people had come from everywhere. For once, Hazel fit right in. The noise of the market felt odd in Hazel's ears after all that quiet. There were merchants advertising their wares, people shouting, strains of music competing for attention. And there was a general hum of activity and humanity. The air carried with it the smell of smoke, cooking meat, and horse poop. Near her, a skinny man in old jeans and a battered army jacket was playing the saxophone. A large yellow dog was curled up next to his legs, and next to it was an open instrument case. The man looked like someone you'd see on the street downtown, except instead of bills and coins in the instrument case, people had dropped little vials of colored powders and liquids. There were other performers, too. Hazel saw a juggler off in one corner. There was a crowd around a woman who stood on a barrel. She seemed to be telling a story or giving a speech. And off in one corner, there was a girl a few years older than Hazel dancing. Hazel moved into the crowd, checking out the merchants and their carts. There were things you might expect: produce and meats, tools, bolts of cloth, handmade jewelry. But there were odd carts, too. Hazel approached one that was covered in identical tiny glass jars. She stared into them at the little odd blotches inside until she realized that each had a tiny clump of different kinds of human hair. There was a cart of books, as clean and modern as the ones on Ben's shelves. There was one that had dozens of little brass clockwork animals. "I can make that scar go away," one of the merchants called to Hazel. She was 2 carts away, but Hazel's wound was apparently that noticeable. Something flickered in Hazel's heart, and she tried to ignore it. This was not the time to be dealing with her scars. She turned and walked away, pretending like she wasn't interested at all. She found herself at the edge of the row, in front of a small cart with vials of different colored liquid. Behind it was a small white-haired woman in a flowered house dress. The woman smiled when she saw Hazel and leaned toward her. "I have potions for you," she whispered. The woman's eyes twinkled like a grandmother who had announced she'd made cookies. Hazel couldn't help but look. Maybe there would be something she could use, something to put the White Witch to sleep, or maybe a luck potion, something. She had no payment, of course, unless the old woman was a Joe Mauer fan and she had Jack's baseball. "What do you have?" Hazel asked. "Mine are the best. You can ask anyone. I specialize, see. This row is for people, over here is for events, and this row is for time. I can brew these for you if you're looking for something particular, but that's extra." Hazel blinked. "A potion for events or time?" "For forgetting," the woman said, as if this was obvious. "Oh," said Hazel. "I was looking for like a luck potion." "Oh," said the woman, like she had specially made chocolate chip and Hazel had asked for oatmeal. "You won't find anything like that here." "I guess I'm okay then." "Are you sure?" The woman looked at her appraisingly. "Yes," Hazel said, moving away. What was she doing? She had no business looking for magic potions. She needed to sleep, and then she needed to find Jack. She was so tired that she was ready to curl up right there in the marketplace and let all the potion seekers step over her. Her eyes traveled around the marketplace, looking for some idea of where to go. And then she saw someone who looked familiar. Hazel walked over to where the performers were, past the saxophonist and the orator, the speaker. At the very edge of the square was the dancing girl, and standing a few feet away was the woodsman Hazel had seen earlier that day. Hazel went over to join the small group watching the dancer. Just then, a woman broke away from the group, shaking her head. The woodsman turned his head to watch her go. His eyes fell on Hazel. "Some people just don't like ballet," he said, smiling. Now I'm trying to remember what that means. I remember Hazel met this woodsman earlier in the book, and Hazel's been wanting ballet lessons all this time. So I'm rereading, I'm skimming, and I see when Hazel saw the woodsman before, back in chapter 14, he left a pair of ballet shoes in the path, but wolves were guarding the shoes, and the wolves wouldn't let Hazel get them. So now I'm going to reread where I am. The Hazel turned his head to watch the dancer go, and his eyes fell on Hazel. "Some people just don't like ballet," he said, smiling. His brown eyes were kind, just like a woodsman's should be. He looked a little like Jack's dad. He even had the same lines under his eyes, and the thought softened Hazel's heart. She gave him a little smile. Her eyes went to the dancing girl. She was beautiful, with blonde hair and big green eyes. She moved like the most elegant ballerina, like she could fly if she set her mind to it. There was no music, but it didn't seem to matter. The way she moved, Hazel heard the yearning of the strings. And then Hazel gasped. On the girl's feet were the red shoes. She couldn't believe it. Someone had left them in the road and the girl had found them. They were magic. Hazel knew that when she saw them, and if she had picked up the shoes, she could dance like that. "She's very good, isn't she?" the woodsman asked. Hazel nodded, eyes on the shoes. "My daughter was a dancer. She was very good, too." "Oh," Hazel shot him a glance. She did not know whether he was using the past tense because his daughter no longer danced or because he no longer had a daughter, and she feared the answer. "She gave herself up to it. Sometimes people get so focused on things they don't see the world around them. That's what I'm trying to tell people. It isn't easy." Hazel nodded, although she didn't know what he was talking about. She was very tired. She needed to ask him for advice. That's why she'd come over. "Do you like her shoes?" he asked suddenly. Hazel nodded. "Everyone does," he said, sounding a little sad. Hazel was confused. Didn't he leave them? She watched the girl dance, bending and stretching and leaping. She noticed there was sweat on her face, and her expression wasn't of beauty or elation, but something like pain. "She looks tired," Hazel said, although maybe she was projecting. "She's been dancing a long time," said the woodsman. "This is what happens." Hazel cast another glance at him. It was on the tip of her tongue to ask him for help, because he would surely take pity on a young girl who needed it, and take out any wolves she met along the way. But something stopped her. "Is she okay?" Hazel asked. "She will be," he said. She wasn't sure she believed him. There was something weird going on. But she was so tired. Her head was a fog. She wasn't thinking clearly, that was all. So she nodded goodbye to the woodsman, and with one last glance at the dancing girl, headed back into the company of the crowd. Which is where we'll pick up tomorrow with Chapter 18, Temptations. Tomorrow's not going to be our double chapter this week. Our double chapter is going to be on, I forgot, I think it's going to be on Friday. Friday should be a double chapter with chapters 20 and 21, unless 20 is a lot longer than I remember. So for now, I'm going to let you go with just a quick update. I'm also going to post on my Google Classroom. We are changing ELA this week. I am going to post 2 News ELA articles. And for each one, you just hold on, Jakai, because I want you to hear this. You only have to pick one of the articles. So there are going to be 2 posted with 2 in each one. Just pick one from each, take the quizzes, and then you're done. Okay? That's all there is for English this week. I am going to go in and I'm going to post the assignments now. If you have any problems, if you have any questions, please let me know. Jakai, I've been trying to get in touch with you, so I'm going to check my email and see if you emailed me back. Otherwise, have a great day. I love you so much, and I'll see you tomorrow at 11. Bye, guys.